Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started. Welcome to the SDG Pavilion. My name is Bahar Sayedi. I'm a Senior Sustainable Development Officer at UN DESA, and I have the pleasure of moderating this event on closing the ambition gap, fostering synergies between climate action and the SDGs. This event is being live streamed, so a welcome to our online participants as well. Just to give the session, this event context before we get started, the reason behind us having this event is to highlight the work that we're doing together with UNFCCC and our partners on strengthening synergies between the 2030 Agenda and the Paris goals. Since 2019, we have been convening annual dialogues. These are global conferences on climate and SDG synergies that provide a dedicated platform for policymakers and practitioners to come together and discuss this topic of strengthening synergies. The last one took place this year in September. It was hosted by the government of Brazil, and we're happy to share some of the outcomes from the Brazil conference at this event. Furthermore, we have a dedicated expert group on climate and SDG synergies. The group was established 2 years ago, and so far they have developed 2 global reports as well as 4 thematic reports. The latest reports was launched in 2024, in July of this year, and I have the pleasure to have some of the members of the expert group with us today who will share and present to you the report and their perspectives. Of course, we have some of the contributors and other experts who are very much involved in this conversation around synergies and strengthening climate action with SDGs, and we're happy we have the pleasure to welcome them as well. But before we get into the weeds of the event, let me introduce my colleague, Mr. Alejandro Kilpatrick. He's the manager of Capacity Building Subdivision, Means of Implementation Division of the UNFCCC, to provide us with his opening remarks. Alejandro, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bahari. Thank you. Can you hear me? Haven't been used to using this system, so I always wonder, but it's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation, to be in this event. As mentioned, UNFCCC and UN DESA have joined forces to promote the issue of synergies, and we're very proud of the work, the collaboration in the context of these reports and the working groups, which I think it shows the commitment from the UNFCCC family and even from our executive secretary to further advance the topic of synergies. Synergies in the context of course, the SDGs and the other multilateral environmental agreements. As we know, we're 6 years away for 2030, so obviously we need to scale up actions and scale up speed. So we have seen that addressing the SDGs in isolation is no longer working, and there's ample calls of working more in a synergistic manner. And in the case of climate change, here in the conference, we're seeing that there is that call for scaling up actions. As the report says, and I'm very, very excited about this latest report on closing the ambition gap, fostering synergies between climate action and SDGs. Synergies, the use of synergies has been around for a long time. And I think nobody can dispute the importance of synergies, but there's still work to be done on materializing those synergies on the ground. And it has to be done at different levels, at the policy level, at the programmatic level, and also in enhancing coherence and cooperation within support providers, for example. Because when you go to the ground, often at the project level, the synergies are already happening. So you cannot really develop a project completely isolated only for climate or only for development or only for biodiversity. Projects are already, in my view, inherently synergistic. It's just how the policies are aligned that allow for these projects to really contribute to the policy instruments that have been defined by countries, for example, in the context of the Rio Conventions, the NBSAPs, the land degradation neutralities, the NDCs, LTLET, NAPs. So, and I think that the report the summary makes a very important point about also, it makes economic sense to do things in a synergistic manner. We have seen examples, for example, in Rwanda, where there was a very interesting study about the savings or the cost effectiveness of doing projects in a synergistic manner that address both the UNEP CCC, the CBD, and the CCD. So even from that perspective, from a financial perspective, it makes good sense to do things in a synergistic manner. And of course, some of us were in Cali, and I had the pleasure of being in Cali, and the issue of synergies came out very strongly between biodiversity and climate change, with very strong signals from that, from parties to the CBD to strengthen those synergies. But again, to materialize them and translate them into concrete outcomes. Just to give an example, in the context of the joint liaison group between the Rio Conventions, the CCD, the CBD, and the UNCCD, we are jointly developing and co-creating a joint capacity building program on synergies between the conventions. That program started this year. We have done several activities, including setting up a dedicated webpage, a series of webinars on various issues that are common to the three conventions. And the intention is to continue this program and expand it next year. So this year was a bit the initial phase. We had events in Cali. We're having a Synergies Day here at the Capacity Building Hub, which will be where this program will be presented. So there are efforts to take this to the next level, and particularly in the context of capacity building, we have found that through the evolution of all these multilateral environmental agreements, there is a need for enhancing capacities at different levels of what these agreements are, how they intersect, and how they complement each other, and how they're linked to the implementation of the SDGs. So we're working together with our colleagues from the CCD and CBD on this matter, and of course, one of the key principles of this program is the alignment with the SDGs. So again, I think this is very timely discussion, and the products will be presented here and have been developed are very useful, and I think we're moving to a discussion where it's not about the importance of synergies, but how to make them effective from the policy perspective. So having said that, I again thank UN DESA colleagues, Baharian colleagues for the kind invitation, and fortunately I will not be able to stay for the discussions, but wish you very fruitful discussions and looking forward to continue the collaboration with UN DESA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alejandro, for those remarks and for joining us despite the hectic schedule of the negotiations. Now, I have the pleasure to welcome Ms. Diana Orje-Wartas. She's the Vice Chair of IPCC and the Professor at Central European University. Diana is also a member of the expert group on climate and SDG synergies, and she will present to you the latest findings of the 2024 report. Diana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bahar. Thank very much for the invitation. And clicker. Or do I just ask for the next slide? I guess I just ask for the next slide. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yes. So thank you. That's wonderful. So I have the absolute privilege to present to you our report, our latest report, on behalf of this amazing expert group, and I'm just one of the members. So we really need to acknowledge the important role of the Luis Gomez Echeverry, who would have presented this, but he gave me this absolute privilege because I'm here in present, and also Heide. And as you see, really very diverse and very strong people contributing. Among others, I'm the present IPCC Vice Chair, but also we have Yuba Sokona, the previous IPCC Vice Chair. So let's see what we have been doing. And as already mentioned, there was a previous report in 2023. Already the 2024 report is getting closer to actually actions. So we focused on 4 particular themes to understand what actually concretely can be done. And these are policy frameworks for synergistic action, measures for synergistic action in terms of knowledge and data. We have about the new financial system, very relevant for this particular COP, and also cities, city platforms for synergistic action. So let's just look at a couple of the findings from the report. As we know, we are really not walking this particular talk yet. For example, if we look at the SDGs, 80% of the SDGs and targets are linked to climate, either positively through co-benefits or negatively through trade-offs. But at the same time, only 23 of the 173 NDCs that we have studied explicitly refer to SDGs. And actually, the majority are failing to consider the interactions between climate policy and SDG progress. And so, the next issue is that it's simply not even well enough understood how climate change will affect the achievement of nearly 60% of the SDG targets. So certainly there is still also a knowledge gap, and the figure shows you the linkages of SDGs with countries' NDCs. So let me further highlight the need for synergies from a report, and I won't be able to go through all of these, but on the right-hand side, in the red, you see a couple of numbers and figures and evidence for the risk that we are taking for not adequately tapping into these synergies. And in the blue circles, you see what the amazing, and really, each number tells on its own an important story for how, if we do the tremendous opportunities. But just to jump into a couple, I would go to the bottom points in terms of the opportunities. So we are in the finance COP. So we do also state in the report that we could actually reduce financial gaps, because if we pursue development and climate targets together, this reduces investment gaps. And I will show you particular data or very telling facts on that in a minute. So also we can achieve targets faster because we can integrate social dimensions and how to reach climate change. And also we can ensure just transitions. So yes, and that was about the financial gaps. So here is the evidence. I know it may be initially a bit complex figure, but it's really very visually already very clearly showing that how important synergies are. So what you see in the rows are the 17 SDGs, and what you see in the column are 6 systems that the IPCC has been looking at. So the energy system, the urban and infrastructure system, the land system, ocean ecosystems, society, livelihoods, and economies and industry. And each of these is divided by, or not divided by, but looks at both mitigation and adaptation. So these are the columns. Every blue bar that you see is clearly just a synergy. Every yellow part of the bar is just the trade-offs. And when you see yellow and blue striped, that can be both a synergy and a trade-off. So it's clear. There are much more synergy. There is almost everywhere a synergy. There are very few white bars where you don't really clearly, easily identify a synergy. There are so many synergies. There are also trade-offs, and there are also areas where there is both. But that means we can manage those, and definitely it's really worth going along the synergy line because we can get much further. So it's a lot of opportunities, but there are challenges. And of course, we could, sit here for the entire session just on the challenges. So let me just identify one of the key ones, and that's clearly fragmentation. Fragmentation in institutional resources, fragmentation in climate finance, and fragmentation in sectoral and multi-level knowledge. So definitely that's an area where we really need to take where perhaps it is most important to add, and that's where we can get most of the synergies if we overcome some of these fragmentations. But of course, it's not easy, because I know that many reports and the IPCC academia, we always give the idea, the recommendation that everything has to be solved together and everything is systematic. But at the same time, you know, policymakers and decision makers are sitting in a particular country, in a particular department, in a particular task, and with a particular budget for a particular KPIs. So it's really not that easy. So that's why we need to talk a lot more. But there are certainly a lot of opportunities. And what could be the most telling opportunity than this? We need, according to the report, and it's not our work, but we just to put the literature together, up to 9 trillion is needed annually, US dollars, for climate finance through 2030. Also, 4 trillion, sorry, sometimes my voice is disappearing. Also, 4 trillion annual investment gap for SDGs in developing countries. Now, but we have just seen many of these can be achieved together. So is there anything better argument that, you know, if we don't pursue these two separately, well, we can either look at it in a way that we can actually achieve these at much lower total investment sums, or if we look at from the other side, we can also look at that for the same amount of money, we can get much more done. So that's in the finance scope, I believe this is the single most important argument. But how actually we can walk that talk? And of course, again, there are many different solutions and suggestions in our reports. I would just like to highlight perhaps this particular one: localizing action, entry points according to local priorities and context. For example, which was also highlighted in our top 10 recommendations. So top-down approaches often fail to address local nuances, hindering effective implementation. So that's why actually, for example, cities have a central role to play in localization, serving as important arenas to accelerate synergistic actions. And also, and they are co-dimensions that are automatically addressed in urban infrastructure interventions through the governance of spaces and places. Also, demand-side solutions we have shown in the IPCC and also in our synergy report, on the thematic report on cities, we have shown that it's demand-side solutions where most of the synergies are, because that's closest to the people, that's closest to the families. If you focus the solution on the actual people, then you get a lot of the synergies, since most of the SDGs are about people. We can significantly reduce greenhouse emissions just from end-use sectors by at least 40 to 70%. Also, a really important entry point for synergies at the city level, but otherwise also, is maximizing health co-benefits. So we are considering that in the continuation, we will focus very strongly on health. Because that's, as you see in the last point, that just for example, improvements on air quality, the co-benefits can range from 2 to $200 per ton of CO2, with a mean of 49. So that we definitely have a lot of very quantifiable co-benefits and advantages. So finally, we have these 10 recommendations, and you are really welcome to look at our report for this. So I'm not going to get into detail, but let me just read these, because I think they are so nicely phrased, and so I'm sure some of these will stick with you. And so first of all, only with unified action can we succeed. Fragmentation is the enemy, that I already argued very strongly for. We do need deep reforms. So, you know, just incremental action may not get us there. But it's best to not focus on top-down, but integrate communities and start and really be inclusive in your approaches, rather than just only top-down methods. Cities are really important drivers and entry points to synergies. But also, we just need to break down silos. But of course, we need to be really smart in prioritizing this, because we can never break down always every silo. So it's good to really find the most important silos to be broken down. But the good news is that experts are everywhere. For example, here in this room, we have so many amazing experts here, so you can be further ambassadors for this, and you are all working on actually helping to maximize synergies. I'm sure that's why you're sitting here, but you can all help. You can all use our report to actually further facilitate your work. I'm sure all of you will find a few gems which will help your work in that. We also just have to protect the most vulnerable. We cannot leave anyone behind, but we cannot do if we don't know. So knowledge and data and information and monitoring are crucial for really being able to make a progress. And finally, it would be great, but unfortunately change won't happen overnight. So we do have to have some sort of patience, and just because it's not everything here tomorrow, we cannot throw our hands into there. Sorry, it didn't work, so walk away. But we really have to continue the effort, because it will work. It just takes time for every action to actually bring the fruits. Thank you very much for your attention, and we are also very happy to receive comments, but you can find the report in that QR code. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Diana. And I know you're running from one event to the other, so I really appreciate you being here. Thank you. Now, without further ado, I'm going to ask our panelists to please join the stage. And let me briefly introduce them while they will come on. We have Mr. Majun. He's the founder and director of the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs. Majun is also one of the members of the Climate and SDG and Synergy report. Please, Majun. We have Mr. Junichi Fujino. He's the principal researcher and program director for the City Task Force Institute for the Global Environment Strategy. IGES has also been a keen supporter of our work on the synergies, and Professor Takeuchi is a member of the panel. Then we have Ms. Catherine Brown. She is the team leader for international climate risk and adaptation at the SEI. SEI is also a contributor to our report, with Mons, the head of SEI, as a member, as it was mentioned by Diana. And then let me introduce Ms. Jennifer Bowman. She's the head of the climate policy at UNDP. And welcome, Jennifer. And we have Ms. Diana Kopansky. She's the head of Freshwater Ecosystems and Wetlands Unit from the Marine and Freshwater branch of UNEP. And last but not least, we have Mr. Joshua Ampensum, apologies for the mispronunciation. He is the co-director of Youth Climate Justice Fund and the founder of the Green Africa Youth Organization. Welcome everyone to the panel. We have a very short time, but an interesting and exciting event. I will ask everyone to keep your interventions to 3 to 4 minutes max, so we can open it up in the end for Q&A and have some interaction with the audience. So let me start with you, Majun. Perhaps you can, following Diana's presentation, you can share some of your insights and perspectives on this work, as well as the work that you did on the report. Over to you.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be invited to join this session, and I'm quite honored to be invited to be part of the working group, and we're happy to produce some of the report that you can see, and Diana just give a pretty comprehensive introduction of some of the findings and recommendations, and I won't delve into details, but obviously we all know that policy is very, very important. To create a policy that integrate, synergize climate action with the other SDG target is important. We have some experience to share from China. I contributed to the report about case studies about how China tried to synergize climate action, for example, with pollution control. Decades of development have benefited our country, but hundreds of millions exposed to air, water pollution, and exposed to very high health risks. And through the efforts, particularly over the past 10 years, to tackle pollution control, we're happy to see that, for example, that that the air pollution problem have been, the pollution level have been reduced by more than half in 10 years of time. Water, all this 300 million rural residents used to exposed to very highly polluted water. Now no longer, they have access to safe drinking water. But during the process, we're very happy to see that the carbon emission, which used to triple, in 10 years of time. In 11 years of time, our coal consumption got tripled before we took the clean air and clean water action. But after that, it's stabilized. And now we're on our way to peak our carbon emission. And so we can already see the synergy. But the further improvement, we understand, mission far from being accomplished. To further improve our air and water and help with all this poverty relief and also the protect public health, we need further. We need to synergize. So we're very happy to see the government have created a policy, particularly over the past 2 years, to highlight the need for integration of climate action with pollution control and expansion of green, meaning to eco-conservation and then high quality development, sustainable development. So we have that experience in China, but how to do it, I'll come back later. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Majun, for also clearly highlighting the linkages between climate action and health. Today is the Health Day at the COP, so very much focused on those linkages. Junichi, over to you. Your perspective, obviously, I just contributed vastly to this process.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bahare, and I'm very much happy to be here. And then, yeah, I just itself saw my boss, Professor Kazuhiko Takeuchi. He's one of the expert group members, and then we contribute to the several thematic the reports. And then just before I have an online meeting with my colleagues about the synergy, and so then I just itself we are very much happy to contribute to the next year's global synergy report or the another thematic reports too. And then, yeah, I would like to share our next challenge that is we'd like to collect more like case studies. We know that there are so many good case studies, but we also need kind of common format to analyze how the synergy have good effect or sometimes how to break the trade-off. For example, last 5th Global Synergy conference in Rio, we just launched this JICA's report, JICA's effort to bring synergy between climate change and the SDGs within international cooperation. Here is Mr. Koji Mitomori from the JICA, and JICA has so many cases, and then we try to format their existing cases into the some common one, and then we also have the next challenge to focusing on Asia Pacific. I'm in Japan, and then IJS itself, our organization started from the 1998, and then we have a mission to contribute to having sustainable development in the Asia Pacific region. So we try to develop the new regional global synergy report in Asia Pacific together with SCAP and then ADB. Hopefully we can share our lessons and then, for example, Africa or Latin America, or if we can have more detail the synergy cases or synergy policies, then we can have more funding, or we can have more the people who can engage. And then I may also want to share another initiative, UN resolution. Yeah, thank you very much. We have also the panelists from the UNEP. Nowadays, I feel that the role of the UNEA becomes much bigger and bigger. And then now we are discussing about the plastic treaty. Hopefully, we have a good treaty by the end of this year. So there are circular, and then here climate, also nature. So how to having the triple planetary issues to be integrated. And so next question so just the last UNEA Minister of Environment Japan launched the UNEA resolution, synergy resolution in UNEA 6. And then next year, December, there is UNEA 7. How to have more international regime framework we can develop through this global synergy reporting, also having more friend country to make our voices more to contribute, for example, post 2030 process. So yeah, still we are on the journey, and hopefully we have more friends. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jiminichi, for your intervention, which to me highlights two critical issues. One, that there is a growing body of examples and practices around the world on enhancing synergies and the importance of bringing that up to the attention of the global community. And second, the increasing attention that this topic of synergies is getting within intergovernmental processes related to environment, related to nature, related to climate and SDGs. Thanks for that. Next, let me now go to Kate. SEI led the development of the policy frameworks chapter of the report. Perhaps over to you to share your perspective and the work that was done over the last several months.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to just share a few, we do quite a bit of work on policy coherence at SEI. It feels like every COP we come and we're updating about our latest findings. So I wanted to share some of our findings from a 5-year study that we've had ongoing, which really reinforces the report. And it speaks a bit more to the policymaking side of this, and especially this question of national context and nuance. So we have a project that we've been doing that looks at 9 case studies across the world, both global north and global south. I won't list all 9 because I can only remember 8 at a time. It's just a given. But one of the things that we were really focused on was trying to understand what are the actual consequences of policy coherence, so the effort to maximize synergies and mitigate trade-offs. And so we have been looking a lot conceptually at how does this actually affect different groups in society if policies are coherent, if we are maximizing synergies, does it actually have an effect? And in particular, does it have an effect for our effort to reduce inequality? Because of course it is one of the overarching goals of the SDGs to leave no one behind. And that's quite challenging to do when you're thinking about trying to mitigate at the same time as you're trying to advance sustainable development. That faces some real challenges. So just to say at a high level, one of the most important findings is that it does actually have a tremendous effect, and we're seeing that across all 9 countries. And the issue areas in each country is quite different, and the groups are quite different that are affected in society. But nevertheless, we see that where policies are coherent, it has a positive effect for the most vulnerable in society. So just to give a few examples, that would be indigenous peoples in Australia, where we're seeing efforts to put in place renewable energy zones, or in Kenya, where we're seeing efforts to balance mitigation efforts with sustainable development efforts to electrify parts of the population that still don't have access to electricity. And so this is quite an inspiring finding, I think, because in the academic space, it is not super well established that policy coherence actually has a good effect in terms of reducing inequality. So we find these to be quite significant, and I'll just highlight one other interesting finding, which is this is a bit counterintuitive, but we actually found that really powerful groups in society benefit from policy incoherence. So where you're seeing incoherence, you see elites and fossil fuel interests and big corporations benefit from that. So we also have to keep in mind that policy coherence is not just technical, but also political. And that where we see challenges, many of those challenges are not just about a lack of coordination or siloing, but actually are about political interests and how these interests are blocking efforts. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, and a challenging one as well. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Extremely useful and critical to also highlight the political aspects of addressing policy coherence in addition to the technical and capacity needs that many countries face. Now, Jennifer, UNDP obviously has been at the heart of the discussions around NDC development and implementation. From your perspective and the work of UNDP, how do you see this conversation around integration of SDGs within the NDC process coming together? What are some signs of hope or challenges?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bahari. Great to join this panel. As you said, UNDP has been very active in supporting countries on their NDC process. And I think as we heard from the introductory presentation and some panelists, there's a lot of understanding on the potential of synergies at kind of a high level. And we also have the projects ongoing where we see inherent in them the synergies between climate action and different development impacts. And I think the NDCs offer a bit of a bridge between those two elements and a platform for some of these different elements to come together from both the evidence base at a global scale as well as what we're seeing practically at the local level. When it comes to the rollout of the support we're providing on NDCs and what we're seeing in countries, we are through what we're calling the Climate Promise, which is something that we had launched under the previous round of NDCs, supporting 125 countries at that stage, now working across the UN system to support countries through this next phase. We're really seeing a shift in terms of how countries are approaching their NDC process. And I think the very first generation was all about showing commitment to the Paris Agreement, showing that we're submitting an NDC. It came in all shapes and sizes, but we're showing commitment. The second generation was all about ambition. So how do we strengthen that NDC and really see demonstrate that the ratchet mechanism is working and that we're really increasing our targets. The third generation of NDC, we're seeing a lot more emphasis on the links between ambition and implementation. So where is it that we can continue to raise ambition, but we need to keep pushing on implementing the current NDC, and how do we connect the dots between those two? And I think when it comes to the SDG linkages conversation, this is the opportunity to connect the dots. So if we can show that ambition is actually a smart development choice, and that by integrating, some of these synergies and some of the opportunities into the NDC, it actually helps to advance ambition while also driving some of that implementation, it's a very strong argument to make as you're going through the process. So we've been taking this on board, and we have a number of different sub elements as part of our climate promise that we're rolling out in terms of a deep dive analytics on looking at SDGs and NDCs and where the opportunities are to come together. We've done a futures projection analysis, which is looking at what does a pathway on an ambitious NDC pathway look like when it comes to poverty, when it comes to shifting on the Human Development Index, showing some really interesting and insightful data. And then also working country by country as we're rolling out the NDC process to see where the entry points are for providing this evidence and showing, this is really where you can make a stronger impact in terms of some of those synergies. So a lot of work going on, but I think there's definitely an interest and a more of a push and a reception from governments to advance the synergy through the NDC process.
Thanks so much, Jenny. And I really like what you said. Ambition is a smart development choice. I think that should be the theme for COP30 if you want to propose it to the Brazilian presidency. Now let me turn to Diana. Diana, your perspectives on synergies and vis-a-vis the work that you're doing and UNEP is leading on.
Enough problems with my voice on a recording that I don't want to listen to it, so apologies, I'm going to take this off. And UNEP has actually been joining hands as well with UNDP to update the NDCs, right? We do see this, the approach through the triple planetary crisis. We're tackling climate, nature, pollution, and those are, of course, enablers to access to people's human rights. We have a human right to a healthy environment, and we know that pursuing the SDGs through some themes or also through ecosystems is really a way that we can accelerate and scale up. So the work I'm doing at the moment is I lead the freshwater ecosystems and wetlands unit, and we know that working on water is such an important piece, and we're really happy to also be supporting and hearing the COP presidency that is going to be launching the Water Declaration and the Baku Dialogue on Water for Climate Action, and UNEP is honored to be hosting that. We've also been supporting it with UN ECE and WMO. And I think that these pieces of work, we're recognizing that actually working thematically, so if we work on finance together, we also have to be working in a synergistic way. If we work also then through this ecosystems lens, or we also do see that we can hit multiple multilateral environmental agreements, which also means that we meet multiple SDGs. But indeed, you can't do what you don't know. And so UNEP really wants to remind everyone that we're halfway through the SDGs. We've done a midpoint review on SDG the 632, which is on ambient water quality. We're also doing we did the report on 651, which is on integrated water resources management. This is exactly about synergistically looking at the water challenge and opportunity. And finally, we are working on 661, which is freshwater ecosystems. How healthy are they, and where are they healthy, where are they unhealthy? So what I know as well in my sort of experience is that people want transparency. They want access to information and knowledge. And this reporting that's been done by countries and verified and supported through the UN Environment Program and the UN Water Team, this is accessible. You can see it. It's geolocated. So if we want to bring attention to areas where we have a real problem to solve, we can do that at the scale through the SDG monitoring tool, through our Freshwater Explorer, and through UNEP's World Environmental Situation Room. So we are seeing the world moving towards open data. It's very critical because it also is empowering. We're empowering decision makers to access the best science available, and we're also empowering communities to also access that science and that information. And I think that coupled with best practice is really something that we can, sort of unlock this hidden gem. And UNEP is really excited because of the way that countries are coming through the UN Environment Assembly, which is universal, the only other universal mechanism within the UN besides the General Assembly, right? So this means that countries are very much realizing that their developmental, their ambition, their livelihoods and lives, and their human rights are also importantly going to be met through action in the environment. And I'm just really excited to see that more and more people are getting on their smartphones, they're accessing the information, they're joining our initiatives like the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and being empowered to know what's happening in their community, what's also happening across the border, because water and ecosystems know no boundary, right? This is connectivity. So we are also helping to make sure that water and this freshwater ecosystems approach is reaching across borders and reaching across boundaries that we've seen in the past. We just a plug for the launch of the Baku Dialogue, the Water Declaration, is happening on the 21st. And I think that this is a real symbol that actually water and working on freshwater ecosystems, we realize that it is going to fast track climate action, not only through the typical, sort of knee-jerk reaction that it's an adaptation piece, it's a resilience piece. No, it's also a huge win for mitigation. If you look at the potential of restoring ecosystems like wetlands, including peatlands, then the emission reduction potential is huge, and we're not going to get there. We're not reaching 1.5 without significant protection and action for ecosystems.
Thank you so much, Diana, and also to illustrating another example of a concrete SDG, SDG 6 on water that is sort of becoming more and more mainstream in the UNFCCC COP discussions. And we see the same thing obviously under the General Assembly. There's a water conference coming up in 2026, and I'm sure climate will be a huge part of that discussion as well. And now over to you, Joshua. Obviously, you're in the world of finance and climate justice. From your perspective, where are we with this topic of synergies with the SDGs when we talk about finance, particularly at this COP where finance is the big sort of topic that everyone has an eye on?
Thank you very much. And same as Diana, I just can't hear my own voice. It freaks me out. So sorry, I'm going to take it off. But I wanted to start by highlighting the report that was just launched. And 24 million jobs, huh? That's an enormous opportunity. And that is in renewables alone, not the other sectors. And there's a new report that states that 5 million new jobs will be created in Africa over the next 5 years, just in transition towards renewables, and solar will play a big role in that. And we will need a new financing mechanism and intersectionality and synergies to leverage this. And one of the biggest challenges that I see in my world is the lack of inclusion of the very workforce that are going to pick up these jobs and the subnational governments in developing the new NDCs that are coming up. So we see that more and more. I mean, as you mentioned, rightfully mentioned, Generation 1, Generation 2, Generation 3, every time there are new NDCs, you see more subnational governments and minority groups being consulted. But we need more of that because their engagement in the development of the NDCs is what gives confidence in the implementation of it. If not, it's almost impossible if they are not included in that part. And to include them means you need some sort of financing that allow for the development of the process to engage with local communities, engage with minority groups and have their input in that. But also what does this mean for different communities and different rural areas in the role they have to play in this implementation. So at the Youth Climate Justice Fund, part of what we are doing is to throw in lens on the role of intersectionality to different foundations and financial structures, particularly in philanthropy, and letting them understand that the whole approach that has been practiced in philanthropy for many years, which is sector and target-based approaches, is very difficult for communities to access funding that way. And a good example is this. One organization I found, the Green Africa Youth Organization, have worked on many years on zero waste. And even though it's, of course, seen as a waste management issue, and typically they were engaged in UNEA and in the UNEP process in the ANC Plastic Treaty, they recently won the S-Shot Prize, £1 million, and it's a very big sort of award for them. But the reason for that was the power of synergies. They've worked with the Ministry of Health because being able to put together a very good waste management strategy for the city meant clean air for people and very much influence in the health sector. They work with the Ministry of Finance in unlocking financing for the waste management sector. They work with the Ministry of Sanitation to allow them to have a process that actually involves informal waste workers, informal workers are typically not part of any of the process that goes on here and any of the process that goes on in international and even sometimes national processes. And the work cuts across many of the SDGs, right? Health, water, clean air, it cuts across food, it cuts across decent work. But this kind of synergy is what is needed to bring dignity to the work that people do, unlock better financial opportunities to people, but also really inject new cash into the real economy that the everyday person can feel the impact of this work. So when I look at the NCQGs that we have been negotiating here and the target of the amounts that we are putting in there and the amount status in this report, then a number of trillions that we need, you can see a wide gap between what COP29, where we are now, and where we need to be. And I would say that we are still in the week 2, which means that we still have an opportunity to really push for more financial targets in the NCQGs. It's not over yet. It's just half time. We still have another half to go. And we can really say that it's game on and we can actually get more commitment in that. G20 is about to start, and I think we need to send a signal that the role of COP29, the confidence that will come from here, has a huge implication also on the G20's potential to really say that you are able leaders and you are responsible and you can actually deliver the financing that is needed to unlock these opportunities that we see. The third thing that I would say is that, young people and minority groups in general, it's often, there's this statement that they need resources and we need to build capacity and all of that. But there is something that was in this report, which I found very interesting, which is, we cannot do something that we don't know, which means there's a huge gap, knowledge gap that we need to really leverage. The challenge is that the knowledge gap is not with the minority groups. It's not with the indigenous communities. It's not with the farmers. It's not with the informal workers. It's not with the young people. They know what they know, and institutions know what they know. What is needed is safe spaces that can allow for different exchange of knowledge. And I think right now it's that those safe spaces do not exist as much. And we need to really put an effort in part of this promoting of this report and in the recommendations. And at the Youth Climate Justice Fund, one of the new commitments we are making is providing funding for different groups to hold convenings with different stakeholders. We are working with UNICEF in country offices to scale youth climate councils at the national level so that young people can have a safe space where they can engage with their policymakers in doing this.
Thank you so much, Joshua, for reminding us of the importance of inclusive processes, as well as the realities on the need for closing the financing gap. Now, I do want to open it to the floor. Thank you, Nadine. This is the QR code for the reports. It is on the screen, but yes, I think our screen could be higher. But nevertheless, this is the QR code. Please take a look at the report and the findings. And now maybe we open it up to the floor for any questions from the audience and any interventions. I do have more questions, so if you don't have any, I'll go back to my panelists. All right, so maybe we give it a bit more time. So for this round, brave soul, over to you. I think there's a mic somewhere. Thanks, Joshua.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the panelists. This is quite a very interesting discussion. As you said, I wish we have even a whole day just to unpack, especially just dissecting the information, the publication of the report. Without wasting time, let me get to gender, SDG 5. Of course, we are saying this scope is a finance scope. And looking at the gender synthesis report that the UNFCCC Secretary have just released, indications are that financing gender issues of crossing the gap between men and women, be it in decision-making participation, be it that vulnerable women in the rural areas who still need to be supported so that they can adapt, increase their resilience, we are still far from reaching that. So I was looking actually to the IPPC report when they were looking at the synergy issues. Of course, we have been talking about gender mainstreaming to make sure that each sector makes sure that their intervention, gender is mainstreamed throughout. But yet we are not getting some progress when it comes to such, irrespective of having gender policies, even with our operating entities under the financing mechanism. So I just wanted to get the thought of the panelists to say, what more can we do to make sure that the next gender action plan have support when it comes to means of implementation? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. Anyone wants to tackle? Did I see a hand? Would you like to? Sure.
Thank you very much. Since this COP focusing on finance, and especially for scale-up finance means need the important player is the private sector, and how to involve or encourage like a synergy concept to private sector is I'm very much interested in. So anyone can give a tips or hint, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Any other questions before we go back? Please go ahead.
What do actually you expect as panelists and experts from this COP29's as a result? What results COP29 will give to the whole world and to sustainable development? And that's all.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, so we have 3 questions, one about gender, one about finance, and one expectations about COP29. So let's start with the gender question. Anyone? Go ahead, Jenny.
Sure. It's on? Okay. Thank you for the good question. I think when it comes to gender, as you say, there's a lot of discussion and kind of momentum behind incorporating, and I think where it comes down to it is in the practical ways that this is happening. I can speak, from the NDC perspective. We've seen a lot of progress in that sense in terms of integrating gender considerations into NDCs and the number of NDCs that have elements of not just incorporating women or other groups into it, but also recognizing the different needs and how that adjusts or influences the various targets that are defined. We see a lot of progress there. I think where, as you mentioned, it starts to get more challenging is how we then deliver on those targets, and that links to the elements of finance, the elements of access to finance, and empowering different groups to be able to deliver on those targets. It's something that we certainly look very closely at within our support for NDCs, and I think it's really a question of being part of the process and being empowered to contribute to defining those targets and those policy frameworks, but then being, having access to the platforms and the finance that's needed to deliver them, which are, two elements that need to be supported. So, yeah, from our side.
Majun. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you. I want to come to the private sector question. I think it's, in our report, we highlighted, being echoed by quite a few panelists about the right, we can't do it if we don't know. I think transparency is so important, to the private sector, to motivate private sector to get involved. It's also equally important. 18 years ago, when our organization was set up, at that time, the China's factory of the world, so many major brands operating there, they use suppliers who reach down to the bottom. They have violations, but when we engage with the brands, they simply say, here in China, I don't know who are polluting and who are not. So I can only buy from the cheapest. But by motivating, by advocating the government to enhance the monitoring and enforcement, we managed to today keep tracking some more than 10 million corporations operating in China. So those major brands, this become a unique resource. Those brands all tap into the data before they, if anyone, violate the standards, they got push notification in their inbox or on their cell phone, so they can intervene and motivate tens of thousands of them to openly address their problem. Those are the ways to enhance. And of course, now, digitally, how to help create digital accounting platform on the carbon side, because if you don't measure, you can't really manage as well. Those digital accounting platform now being developed so that major brands can motivate their hundreds of thousands of suppliers to measure and to disclose. We're talking about, hundreds of millions of tons of carbon emission being measured and disclosed. And also, that it is also equally important to engage the consumers so that they can make greener choices and then motivate the corporations to enhance their ambition and to make those put private money into that. With that, one of the digital function is based on the life cycle emission factors database. We can help the consumers to use our function to take a picture and of any objects, and then use AI to identify what that is, and then get a watermark of the embedded carbon of all these different products, so that they can hopefully, eventually make greener choices and motivate them to make change. And last point I want to make is, in China, on the expansion of green, on the ecosystem, we have made an effort to, in Chinese territory being divided into 44,000 different eco-function zones. 3 million square kilometers are allocated for red line zones for eco protection. The rest of it, some of them, are designated air priority, some for water, and all this, and then we geolocate more than 10 million corporations and projects on the digital map. Those major banks tap into the data before they issue loans and then try to facilitate the green finance request. So I think there are all these ways now that IT technology development have created vast opportunities for the expansion of the rights to know. So I hope that, I'm very happy that a whole group of African NGOs approach us and saying they want to do a Pan-Africa. Our app is called Blue Map app, and they want to do an African version, so we're helping them. I think globally, I hope we all take notes of this report suggestion. I think globally we need to create a global data infrastructure, which can motivate all this synergy between all these different SDG and climate actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Majun. Joshua?
Yeah, I'll quickly add to this on the question of expectations, but also private sector. On Saturday, we had a press conference with Anatoni, the Minister for Climate for Brazil, and a few others. And there are 38,000 businesses who are signed on to a campaign that they want to be ambitious, but they need government commitments to match their ambition. And I think this is why COP is very important. That's one of the expectations. How can we get governments to meet the ambition of businesses that are very progressive, right? And on the same lane, I think that I just want to point out a nuisance that I'm really struggling with. We want to influence private sector, but yet when they show up in spaces like this, then there are big headlines, how many lobbyists are at COP, right? And we frame every private sector person engaging in this process as hijacking the process. Like, we cannot change the private sector and influence them if we close and make this space so hostile for them to exist. So I really want to point that out, because I think this is one thing that I really find as a struggle, that on one hand, we want to have private sector being very ambitious. On the other hand, we do not make it welcoming for private sector entities to engage in this process to understand what is the ambitions we are raising here, what is the changes they can do in their own processes, and what ambition they can sort of take back to their companies, into their boardrooms. So really, I'm just really pointing that out. But I think we need to create a space that is, collaborative, that is safe, that allows different actors to come in and say, this is how we want to drive change, this is how we want to do it, or how we can do it, how can we partner with you and work with you as governments to do that. But as it stands now, I see that there is a certain level of commitment, not from our private sector. Of course, greenwashing is also real, and many of them are not doing great. But for those who are doing well and want to create that ambition, how do we create commitment from the side of government that can match that ambition and really make it attractive for others to jump on board?
Thank you. On this question of expectations, maybe I'll open it up to all the other panelists if you want to build on what Joshua mentioned. Junichi.
So, about the results of COP29, so still we don't know the result, but I think closing the ambition gap is very important. And then, it also holds the business. How we have a more clear vision, clear future. Because if you live in a very good insulation, ventilation, housing, you don't need so much energy for cooling, heating, or you have also very healthy lifestyle inside the house. If we have such clear, visions in the future, we have more business on that side. Because this time, UNEP, you set up the building and the cooling pavilion. This is another way to contribute to make more visible futures. Then we have a market. Tomorrow, 11:45, we have another side event at the Japan Pavilion. We have an environment minister. I'd like to continue this discussion. If you have time, please come to our side. Sorry, it's a commercial.
Kate.
Yeah, I was going to respond to this question about, what to expect from the COP. I mean, it made me think about what you said about ambition is a smart development choice. I think that that's true, but also that those smart choices have to be enabled. And of course, this is the finance COP. And so I think the big outcome that everyone's got their eyes on is the NCQG, the new collective quantified goal. And I think that we need to see a significant number there. and a significant provision of public resources, because many, as you would know better, both of you would know better than me, but many of the commitments in NDCs are conditional on receiving international financial support. And so in order to enable these synergies and to see outcomes not just on climate but also on development, we need to see that support mobilized. And so I think that's what everyone has their eyes on, and I encourage everyone to exert pressure in whatever way you're able to try to see that delivered.
Thank you. Jenny?
And maybe just building on that, I think really two signals that we need out of COP, both related to ambition on finance. We need to have a signal that, and this is of course, the commitments on the public side, but also a signal to private sector that this is the direction that we're going, and this is the path for investment. So that I think is a critical signal, and then a signal that ambition on targets are coming as well as we enter into the final stages of the NDC process, and really expecting to see countries coming forward next year with their new NDCs. We need to see greater ambition. We need to be it needs to underpin the system and the commitment to having NDCs and the Paris Agreement kind of be resilient and be advancing as we enter its 10th anniversary, and really demonstrating the commitment of parties to making that happen.
Thanks, Jenny. Diane, would you like to share?
I guess one practical thing I'm looking forward to is supporting the COP presidency in their ambition to launch the Baku dialogues on water for climate action. And this will also be a beautiful strand for people, for communities to take activation, for having a voice, for gender approaches. We know that women are disadvantaged through access to water, but also financially disadvantaged. And I would say that private sector is also having a seat at the table. But I think we need a systems change. We need a thought change that GDP isn't everything. It's not the all-encompassing thing we thought it was when we started out, right, with the SDGs. We need to shift to green and meaningful jobs, and that people from every walks of life has an opportunity to make an impact. So we also really need to get the metrics right, because the deals that are being made around carbon markets or debt for nature swaps or water for debt swaps need to be appropriate. They need to be scientifically founded, they need to be fair, they need to be transparent, and they need to be also counting the differences between the tropics, the tropical forests or the tropical ecosystems that churn out at a faster rate, and the global north and the south that don't produce as much. So let's be also looking to ecosystems to guide some of these metrics and measures, and we'll invite as well the private sector to invest in these metrics and measures instead of relying on the public purse to always provide that science. I mean, I might tell my age, but when business plans were put together a while ago, we always had this R&D, right? Research and development. The research and development costs are being borne by the public purse. We need to shift that back. Private sector can also think about profitability and what is the growth mindset. And I think we need to look at planetary boundaries, and we really need to reflect on what is the future for people, because as businesses operate in a space that don't respect that, we have losses, right? We have climate impacts, we have losses in cities, we have loss of land and lives and livelihoods, we have fires and droughts. And so this piece on water that I'm really excited to actually be an opportunity as well, to take this approach that's going to be across boundaries, across cultures, and around the world. Thanks.
Thanks, Diana. And Majun, did you want to come in, or last word?
On the expectations, NCQC is so important, and NDC, I think we all want it to be ambitious to really align with the 1.5 degree Celsius target. But having said that, I think the most important, I hope it will be delivery. You know, we cannot just push for the ambition and without really delivering that. I think with that accountability, it's extremely important. The reason that we focus again and again on monitoring and disclosure, because that data-driven analysis can be made, assessment can be made, and then based on all kind of index, then create accountabilities. So next month we're going to launch our 100 Chinese city about their synergistic performance, not just on the pollution control, but climate action and ecosystem protection and high quality development. So I hope that there will be some more of this can happen globally and to hold them accountable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Majun, and thank you so much to all the panelists. We have reached the end of our event. Thank you so much to you all, the participants. I won't attempt to summarize this rich conversation. Just 3 points to close from the perspective of UN DESA. One, the importance of analysis and deepening the evidence base on this topic of interlinkages between the SDGs and climate action was reiterated. From our side, we are committed to continue our efforts on that front. The work of the expert group will continue. There will be a global report, 2025 report, that will be launched next year. And the experts are at the moment planning additional thematic reports that may be launched along with that. 2, importance of inclusive processes, engagement of youth, engagement of private sector, engagement of gender, engagement of all sectors of society was mentioned. Again, from our part, the convening of global conferences on climate and SDGs and climate synergies are meant to offer a dedicated platform for all stakeholders to come in and discuss synergies and push this topic forward. The next conference will take place in 2025. It is hosted by the government of Denmark. The date has not yet been announced, but look out for an announcement of that, and we welcome you all to join that. And third, the importance of signals, political signals was reiterated here. And this is really why UNFCCC and UN DESA are engaged in this work. This report can be distributed and it can sit on the desk as you see it. But what matters is that the messaging of the report is translated into clear political signals and is integrated in intergovernmental processes related to the SDGs, related to climate, related to nature. We are seeing progress on that front. UNEA is an example. This year, the High-Level Political Forum in New York reviewed SDG 13. The outcome of that led to a ministerial declaration that for the first time encourages member states to enhance synergies between climate and development plans. This is the first time that it has been recognized in the global process on the SDGs, and this is because of the work that colleagues have been doing and we have been pushing forward on the policy front. We hope to see similar signals coming out of the UNFCCC process, similar to what we're seeing in the intergovernmental processes on the UNEA. With that, I thank the panelists again and the audience for joining us, and this conversation will be continued. Keep in touch and see you at the next event. Thank you.